Last part, a marriage that changed when money finally spoke. Mark cleared his throat and tilted the laptop toward me, like he was pitching a work idea. He talked about how couples grow, how circumstances change, how maybe the prenup didn't reflect who we are now. He suggested joint accounts, shared investments, a fresh start. I listened without interrupting. I noticed how careful his tone was, how different it sounded from the man who once highlighted clauses for me like warnings. Back then, he'd spoken with certainty. Now he spoke with hope. When he finally stopped, I told him I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I reminded him that the agreement wasn't something that happened to us, it was something he wanted badly, enough to design himself. I asked why it only felt outdated now. He didn't have a good answer. The truth landed quietly between us. Independence had been fine when it protected him. It felt unfair only after it protected me. I told him I'd think about it. Not because I owed him a yes, but because marriages deserve honesty, even uncomfortable honesty. A week later, Mark stopped pretending it was a discussion. He came home tense, jaw set, and told me he'd spoken to a lawyer just to understand our options. He said the prenup was outdated, unfair, and no judge would look kindly on it now. He talked faster as he went, like momentum might replace logic. Then he dropped the word divorce into the room and waited for it to scare me into agreeing. It didn't. I told him calmly that I wasn't voiding anything, not out of spite, not out of greed, but because it represented the terms we both accepted when it mattered. I reminded him that I'd lived with those rules for years without complaint. That's when his confidence cracked. He said he didn't want to start over, that divorce would be messy, expensive. He asked if I understood what I was risking. I told him I did. I also told him I'd already thought it through. The silence that followed felt different from before, lighter, almost relieved. Mark started pacing, backtracking, saying maybe he'd spoken to Hoshley, maybe we just needed time. But something in me had settled. The threat he'd used to control the situation had removed his power instead. I agreed to the divorce, not dramatically, not angrily, just clearly. Mark looked stunned, like he'd expected me to fold. Instead, he was the one panicking, talking about counseling, about compromise, about how he didn't mean it. I listened, but my decision didn't move. That night, I slept better than I had in years. The divorce moved faster than I expected. The prenup held exactly the way it was. Written, clean, predictable, no dramatic courtroom scenes, no last-minute revelations. Mark tried once more to argue that it was unfair, but the same document he'd once defended with pride now spoke for itself. Separate meant separate income, savings, everything. We sold the house and split what we'd agreed to split. I moved into a quiet place closer to my office, the kind of apartment with morning light and no emotional echoes. I bought furniture slowly, choosing things because I liked them, not because they fit someone else's idea of a shared life. Mark sent a few messages at first, apologies, what-ifs, long explanations that never quite became accountability. I wished him well and stopped replying. Closure didn't come from winning, it came from not reopening the door. Work stayed busy, rewarding. I started mentoring junior associates who reminded me of who I'd been: tired, hopeful, underestimated. I traveled more, visited friends I'd neglected, and learned how calm life feels when no one is quietly keeping score. One evening, months later, I parked my car and caught my reflection in the window, older, steadier, unmistakably at ease. I smiled, not because everything had worked out perfectly, but because I had trusted myself when it counted. The prenup wasn't the lesson. Paying attention was. Independence isn't a lack of love, it's the foundation that makes respect possible. When you stop shrinking to fit someone else's comfort, you finally make room for a life that fits you. The moment someone uses leaving as leverage, they've already changed the relationship. When a threat no longer scares you, it's often because you've already outgrown the situation. Growth doesn't ask permission, but it does demand respect. Real partnership isn't about rewriting rules when the outcome changes, but honoring them when it finally counts. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you love these video. The end.